Well, I was thankful for a privy this morning. The shelter was down there. Got a 0.4 mile walk back to the trail, and it's slippery mud, so hopefully I don't slip too much. So I've got loads of stories from last night. I'm going to break it up into multiple parts so I can show views along the way and talk about last night. Been climbing, so I'm a little out of breath. So I got into camp. I was soaked completely through. Got in there, got into the shelter, and immediately started stripping clothes off before I started cooling down. And my clothes were steaming. They were so warm from pushing hard into the shelter. Got changed into dry clothes and got my bed ready, and luckily warmed up really quick. So there were a couple young men at the shelter, along with other thru hikers, and a couple other section hikers. But the young men that were there apparently came in before anybody else and had all of their gear was soaked. Every bit of clothing they had, everything in their backpack, and they were in a hypothermic situation. So luckily, one of the other hikers had an extra quilt. So they had gotten the one that was in worse condition under the quilt. The other one was working on building the fire, which we had wet wood, so it was pretty hard to do. But hand warmers and body warmers were given to the one that was really hypothermic. And by the time I had gotten there, the Garmin was used to reach out to get help. Messages were taking a long time back and forth due to the clouds and where we were in the trees. But eventually, while I was there, it was determined that they were going to send out a Black Hawk helicopter to rescue the young man that was in worse condition. The helicopter did come a few hours later, flew over about 3 times, but it was thick fog. They did say that they were going to try to come down into the shelter, so we needed to pack up all of our gear, and anything less than 60 pounds needed to be secured so that it wouldn't blow away. So they ended up not landing. We got a message a little bit later saying that some of the Park Services people were going to be arriving, and they were on their way. So we'll end the story right there and pick up in just a little bit. So shortly after I had arrived at the shelter, the one young man had been working on the fire for about 2 hours trying to get it going, and he could get flames on it every once in a while. He had some coals down below, but all the extra wood we had was all wet. Yesterday was super wet, as you saw from the trail. When he determined that it was a futile effort to continue working on the fire, I asked him if he was warm. He said that he was. I suggested that he crawl in the quilt with his buddy and try to share some body heat with his buddy. I asked if he didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was willing to do that myself, but he said he was comfortable doing that. So they got under the quilt together and tried to share some body heat. So later in the night, about 1:50 in the morning, Park Services arrived. The 2 young men had managed to stay warm enough to keep from going into shock or anything. And the Park Services brought in some heat, I guess bags or something, to warm the young men up so they could sleep through the night. The Park Services people stayed through the night and helped to get the boys packed up this morning and walked down 4 miles to where their ATV was so that they could get them out of the park. So hopefully everything is okay with the young men, and hopefully this doesn't discourage them from outdoor adventures in the future, but also helps them to be a little more prepared in the future as well. So there are tough climbs in between each of these little ridge walks, but anyway, I didn't get much sleep last night, as you might well imagine. By the time Park Services did the vitals and made sure the young men were going to be okay and got themselves situated outside, since the shelter was pretty full, they decided to sleep outside the shelter. It was pretty early in the morning, and I hadn't slept very much before they arrived. So I was looking at possibly doing a 20-mile day today, but the shelter before that's only 13 miles. So with all my wet clothing and everything being soaked in my pack and being really heavy, I am going to take an opportunity to cook a lunch today and try to dry out as much as I can. And that way I can get my pack lighter. And tomorrow I'll do a push out of the Smokies. So yesterday, some of the other hikers reported that while they were walking in that extremely high wind, trees like this one here right on the edge were blowing so hard it was lifting the trail. So the earth was lifting up like the tree was about to go over. It sounded really scary. Luckily we had stayed put and waited for the wind to subside a little bit. It still blew almost the entire way till I got to camp, but I was on the safer side of the mountain most of the time. There was some ridge walks that I went over that I was pelted in the face by driving wind-driven rain, but most of the time I was walking through sloshy water on the trail. So alright, so I know this is going to be an extremely long video, but why not? We're in the Smokies and it's beautiful out here. So Money and I separated yesterday as we reached the 200-mile mark, and the month of walking together. We had walked together from near Amicalola Falls all the way past Klingman's Dome. We'd been together for an entire month, and as we reached the 200-mile mark and a month in, it got us both thinking about what our priorities on the trail are. And they were different. He wants to take his time and enjoy the trail and trail life, which is great. And I have obligations this summer that require me to put in a lot more miles going forward to be able to complete the trail. So we had been talking for a couple days before we decided to split. We were actually going to go into Gatlinburg yesterday, and that was going to be our last day together. But since the change of plans, when he reached the shelter after Newfound Gap, I decided to go ahead and move on and do another 7.2 miles that day, so I could start getting my miles now. So I wish the very best for Money. I hope he finds pure enjoyment on the trail. I did have a wonderful time hiking with Money for the last month. It was, I wouldn't have done anything different. We had a lot of fun. We got to experience a ton of stuff together, see some great sunrises and sunsets. We were able to camp on mountaintops. Just having the security of another person to do that with was amazing. So Money, if you see this, man, I hope the rest of your hike's great. Hope we get to meet again out here. I'm sure we will. But if not, we'll stay in touch, man. Bye. Well, just got by one, got to figure out how to get by another here. There was definitely some trees falling yesterday. All right, we're getting stuff dry. Got a nice sunny side of the building with a little breeze. I'm sitting here, gonna cook me some food, dry some stuff out so my pack is probably like 10 pounds lighter when it's dry. So this is the shelter. Nobody's here right now. We got water right out in front, coming out of a pipe. Pretty cool. I'm gonna eat lunch here. So, stopped at the last shelter, dried my clothes for 2 hours in the sunlight. It was probably 3/4 of the way dry. Still, I'll be putting on wet clothes if I wear them, but they're damp, not soaked. So, sure dropped a lot of weight off my pack. I feel a lot better now. Probably lost 6 or more pounds of water, and now the pack fits a lot better. So I'm moving at a lot better pace. Had a nice warm meal, called home for a minute. It's a good stop. All right, so gonna take an early day today. Get done about 4:30. I'll have about 13 miles in. It would be possible to put in another 7, but it looks like it's pretty steep downhill, and I don't know if my knees would want to be pushing that hard on a downhill. So just take it nice and easy and relax for the evening and start putting in big miles here the next few days to try to get to Hot Springs. All right, so in light of recent events, I do have a tacos tip of the day. It is to use a compactor bag, trash bag, or some type of dry bag inside your backpack. And then I also, on top of that, use Ziploc bags for anything that I really want to keep dry. That way when I get to camp and everything else is wet, I will have dry items in my backpack. That is Taco's tip of the day. Ew. This looks slippery. So that felt a little bit dangerous. Didn't know how deep the roots are on this tree, but there's lots of holes already where maybe people fell through, but it pulled loose all the way over to here. Gonna take some good trail maintenance to repair that.